Okay, welcome. We're going to be talking today in micro lecture 3.1 about the rules for insanity. Again, this is going to be just a quick 5-minute lecture to kind of give you guys a little background, focus a little bit on North Carolina. Okay, so that picture there of that individual, that is Daniel McNaughton, and he is famous, I guess, infamous perhaps, for the McNaughton rule. And we'll talk more about him in 1 second. But basically the McNaughton rule, which is the dominant rule, about half the jurisdictions in the United States use it, says that someone is not guilty by reason of insanity if they do not know right from wrong or they cannot understand what they did because of a disease of the mind. Now, North Carolina uses this rule, and one of the things it does is it follows the standard practice that every individual is presumed to be sane, and that presumption of the law is rebuttable. The defense can raise insanity, but they have to prove it. Once they rebutted that presumption by the presentation of evidence, he can be found insane, but it is not shifting the burden of guilt. It's merely making someone overcome that presumption. There's really three stated, there's really four, kind of a hidden one there, but there's irresistible impulse test as an alternative where a defendant could not control their actions because of a mental disorder. There's the modern model penal code test where you are unable to act according to the law or understand your acts because of a mental defect. Or the Durham rule, which says the defendant's mental defect led to the crime regardless of its. Now, I said there was kind of a hidden one there. That hidden one is abolishing it. At least 4 states in the United States have simply abolished the insanity plea. And there's other permutations. There's not guilty but insane. There's diminished capacity, which is related to it but not truly insanity. Okay. Insanity and mental illness. Now, typically insanity has some basis in some form of mental illness that is diagnosed by a doctor. However, you have to understand that insanity, that term that we use so freely, is not a medical term. Rather, it is a legal term. A doctor doesn't say someone is insane. He can offer an opinion as to mental illness, but a judge has to rule that someone is insane. That means, of course, that simply because you have a mental illness, and here are 3 examples of mental illnesses, that doesn't render you insane. So if you're a kleptomaniac, where you feel a desire to steal, you're not insane. Pyromania, a obsession with fire, you're not insane. Pedophilia, an obsession with children sexually, again, you're not insane under the law. So, what conditions then typically do form the basis of insanity pleas? Well, the psychosis are the dominants. And these include things like delusions and hallucinations. Usually you are going to see someone who is suffering from a psychosis has a severe break with reality. And this is usually evidenced by psychotic episodes, and probably the most famous and readily identifiable would be paranoid schizophrenia. There are a couple others that possibly could. Severe depression, certain forms of mania, extreme anxiety disorders, the big one there being PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and possibly traumatic brain injuries. Now, with the exception possibly of PTSD, almost all your insanity pleas that are going to make the news or be popular, they're going to be paranoid schizophrenics. Okay, so I said earlier that we were going to refer to Mr. McNaughton, that earlier picture. Well, in 1843, Mr. McNaughton tried to kill the English Prime Minister. He actually shot his secretary, thinking they were plotting against him. He went on trial, and eventually, out of this case, the English government formulated the rules for insanity. Now, strangely enough, these rules were created in the English House of Lords. At that time, there were two houses of Parliament, kind of like we have a Senate and a House. They had the House of Lords and the House of Commons. The House of Lords, which had nobles sitting in it like counts and earls and dukes, set up a panel headed by this gentleman here on the slide, Sir Nicholas Tyndall, very famous judge and defense attorney, and they developed the rules. So no doctors were involved directly. Some knowledge of medicine perhaps was possessed, but they didn't go to a doctor and said, formulate these rules. So the weird thing about our rules on insanity, I think, is first of all, they were developed about 180 years ago, during a time we knew almost nothing about mental illness. They weren't created by doctors, they were created by lawyers. So there's something I would say to be an argument to be made that you really probably should reform them. Okay, so a couple of quick points. How common are they? Because if you watched popular media, you would think, well, I mean, this happens all the time. So first of all, it's freakishly rare. Almost every study I've seen, and I'm citing the jurisprudence on the insanity defense, a Carolina Academic Press book that was written in 1994, says that it's about 1% of the time. So if you take that there was roughly, say in 2016, 10,000 arrests for homicides in the United States, about 1% of the time insanity will be raised as a defense. So 10,000 cases, that would be 100 insanity pleas across the entire United States. They are only successful about 25% of the time. So of that 100, there'd be 25 people that plead insanity and are successful in pleading it. So most of those successful pleas, of the 25 that occur in the United States in a given year, both the prosecution and the defense have agreed. Rarest of all would be the defense to raise it, the prosecution to oppose it, you go to trial and you're successful. As I said, most of the time, defense raises it, prosecution looks at it, says, okay, yes, we agree, they're insane. After you're found insane, different states have different procedures. North Carolina has a kind of committal law where you're going to go to a mental institution and you're going to be there, quite possibly the rest of your life. Now, to give you an idea of the rarity of this in North Carolina, I practiced law in the United States, in North Carolina, since 1986, primarily here in Wake County, a few other counties. In those years, I have seen exactly one case of a violent felon who pled insanity and was opposed by the prosecution, and the plea was successful, was found not guilty by reason of insanity. One in 30 plus years. So it is a freakishly rare defense. Okay, that's it. That's about our 8-minute lecture today, and we'll pick up with the next one well, next time you click on it. You don't have to worry about it.